Hey, gang. So it's been 2 weeks, so CIG has dropped another roadmap update on us, and so I thought that we would go ahead and get through. There weren't any huge monumental changes this time, but there's a couple significant things that wrapped up. There's a couple moves kind of in there, and I thought that it might be fun to dive into a little conjecture on one of my favorite topics. So that sounds interesting to you? Come along with me. Let's get this. All right, for those of you who haven't seen one of these before, basically what I do in these is I'll kind of go through the changes on the roadmap, and I'll usually start with the roadmap roundup, click over to the release view, just kind of see what's changed there. And then the real meat of this show is I go through the progress tracker and kind of talk about what's changed, why that's significant, and just kind of some conjecture on where I think they're going with it. This time around, the major changes are weirdly on the roadmap roundup, is where most of the changes are this time, which is unusual. Usually they mention like one or two things in the roadmap roundup, and then there's 50 things they haven't talked about in the progress tracker. This time it's kind of the opposite of that, where you would kind of expect that mid patch they don't really change a bunch of their sprints, but we'll get into that as we go. So let's just go ahead and get into it and not waste any more time. So this is the roadmap roundup. So I'll skip this up here. Well, actually, what the hell? I'll read it this time. I've skipped it the last like 10 times. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Every 2 weeks, we accompany the roadmap update with a brief explanatory note to give you insight into the decision making that led to any changes. This is part of an effort to make our communications more transparent, more specific, and more insightful for all of you who help make Star Citizen Squadron 42 possible. With that said, let's go ahead and dive into this week's roadmap roundup. So that's kind of lost its relevance. Really, the roadmap roundup is really just major changes on the release view, which in my opinion isn't the actual roadmap. The actual roadmap is the progress tracker, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So most of the notable changes for April 5th, 2023 are they just had all of the cards, well, not all, the vast majority of the cards on the release view move from tentative to committed, which means they're practically guaranteed to be in the 319 patch. And as we go through the progress tracker, you'll see the reason for that is that they're basically 100% complete. And I think even the one that's tentative right now is a pretty easy swing and a hit for 319. So let's go ahead and get to it. So tractor beam attach and detach. And so we just saw this one, I think, on Around the Verse, Inside Star Citizen, a week or two ago, where they're actually pulling components off of ships. I actually wasn't expecting this one to drop until 3.20 because typically the way they do it, or at least the way that they did mining, was they'd release a like a tier 0, tier 1, tier 2. And I was thinking tier 0 for salvaging was scraping, where you're basically taking off the skin, and then munching was where you're basically munching the skeleton, and then a later one would be where you're pulling components, and then like tier 4 would be outgassing, so you basically take out the gas and the fluids there inside the ship. Kind of think about it as reverse order of operations that you'd eventually take a ship down. If you've ever seen Hard Space Shipbreaker, you got to go into the ship and pull everything that's valuable first. You got to vent the ship so that it doesn't explosively decompress as you're pulling it apart. Then you gradually pull it apart. But in this case, you'd actually pull off the skin, and then you just end up with basically an empty shell that you munch down by either vulture or reclaimer or whatever they shove in between those two ships. But in this case, this is tractor beam attach and detach. This iteration of the tractor beam gameplay will add functionality to the tractor beam attachment of the multi-tool, allowing it to detach and attach items from the ship item ports. This functionality can either be used for component exchange, replacement or restocking rockets, or to scavenge other ships. So you can pull missiles off of wrecked ships and put them on your ship, either as cargo or literally put them on the missile slots for your ship. Or if a wreck ship has better guns than you've got, you could swap them out. Really cool. And I honestly wasn't expecting to see that probably at the earliest, the end of the year. So it's really cool they got that going. New player experience, an initiative for improving the initial first 30 minutes of gameplay experience, which will help players understand the context of the world and introduce them to some of Star Citizen's basic features. This update focuses on the experience in Area 18 and Bikini Point. This is one of those things I kind of disagree with. I'm not going to go on to all of these in this detail, but I think that they should be utilizing Arena Commander, because Arena Commander is a simulator that exists inside the universe of Star Citizen. So it's basically a game that people that live in the Star Citizen universe play, or a simulator that people in the Star Citizen universe use. So it totally makes sense that your first orientation of the verse would be, hey, prove you can fly so that we can give you your captain's license so that you can fly around our city or whatever. And then when you log in, you'd basically step out of the simulator in whatever starting zone you selected. And that way it's scalable to when the verse is 100 systems and you want to start in, let's say, Goss or something like that, you step out of the simulator and you're in Goss, as opposed to starting at Bikini Point or Area 18. I just think that would make more sense. And then you could also add tag-ons like, or add-ons where you could be like, do you want to learn how to mine? Do you want to learn how to salvage? Do you want to learn how to do like scanning, that kind of thing? You could just sort of have these optional modules on the end of it. Learn how to do a multi-cruise ship, that kind of thing. You could do it in the simulation in the verse, as opposed to actually being in Area 18, which is a physicalized location, because that's going to become the noob port, which granted Area 18 is probably, if you're going to do it, Area 18 or New Babbage are probably the best ones. Anyway, let's keep going. That's kind of my theory on that one. New mission, salvage contracts. With more civilian access to salvage ships, contract brokers are offering salvage jobs for derelicts around Lagrange points around Stanton. These brokers can charge a fee for their services, so this will require some buy-in, but the contractors are free to keep any salvage material for resale. This one's cool because it's kind of a first step for claims, which I'm sort of surprised they haven't implemented yet, because they've got the beacon system. It would give the scanning ships like the Carrack and the Terrapin something to do. And I guess ships like the Herald and the MSR outside of Rhine Cargo could fly up, find these locations, find these valuable derelicts, and players could make these contracts, which are basically claims. Like, you have the scan information on the ship, like it's this, roughly this valuable, these are the things that are showing as components on it, this is roughly how big it is, it's a C2 or it's an Idris or something like that. And then somebody could be like, I want that, and the person that's selling it could be like, 100K, I'll give you its location. Then when they buy it for 100K, they get the location, just like a beacon. So you don't even have to be there anymore. Basically, when you tag it with a claim, it creates that location on the beacon, effectively already in the game. Seems like it's low-hanging fruit. Anyway, new missions, Ghost Hollow PvP mission. So they used to have a PvE mission, now it'll be PvP. So there's probably going to be either a drug producing kiosk or something like that, and basically just going to turn Ghost Hollow into a continuous jump town would be my guess. Lorville Cityscape is looking gorgeous, so really looking forward to that one rolling out. But all of those are cards that we've known about for a while. I'll jump over the release view and show you those. So here's the release view. So again, Lorville Cityscape, these are ones that we've known about for a while. They were just tentative, now they're committed. Which they could have been committed a month ago, really. New player experience, new missions, Ghost Hollow. These are salvage contracts, moving things with the tractor beam. And the RSI links is the only thing that's tentative. And if they're really planning on dropping 319 in June, which is what this says up here, and they've said this a few times in the shows, which I am as skeptical about them dropping 319 in June as I was about them dropping 318 in December. Basically, the reasoning is they haven't dropped 318.1 yet, and they might drop it by the end of the week. But they've already loaded up 318.2, which will be cooking in the oven for at least a couple weeks. So by then you're looking at the start of May, and you're telling me you're going to drop 318.2 in May. Well, let's take it back one. You're going to drop 318 in March. You're going to drop 318.1 in April. You're going to drop 318.2 in May, and you're going to drop 319 in June. So you're going to have like a major patch every month for the next 3 months. I'm a little dubious, but I hope it's true. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into the juicy bits. So let's pop on over to the tracker, the progress tracker here. So this is the progress tracker, and basically what I do is I set it up on the 1 quarter view, so it goes week by week. And this line right here is where we currently are. So we have just started Q2. Now, in theory, 319 will be dropping right here. So you can kind of get a sense for what's feasible if they're going to drop 319 by that date, like what would have to be wrapping about week 10 over here. At least the planned sprints. Of course, they're going to polish things in the PTU and when the game rolls out. So just because something is running over that deadline doesn't necessarily, it won't make it in there, but that's just kind of a heads up. I always go through and break these out so you can sort of see, normally you just get this solid blue line without a whole lot of context. If you pop it open, you can see the actor feature team is the one that was working on this. So if this were just concept art, then you'd know that they're going to be drawing pictures of whatever that thing is, but it's not going to actually be implemented in the game for a long while. So this is actor status 2. Work has just started on this one. I'm thinking this one is kind of a sneaky med gameplay tier 2. Yeah, I guess it would be tier 2, mainly because of the second bit that's in here. It says DNA integrity, medical insurance, cybernetic limbs, and cloning, but it also has things like hygiene. So NPCs might be, you might actually have to start using that shoilet in your ship just to like take a quick shower before you go and try to make trade deals or pick something up or buy something. But this one, again, you can kind of see week 13 right here. So if this were a 319 ad, maybe more likely it's going to have more weeks added on as they keep working on it. They've basically just started a sprint. So CIG uses the agile system, and now would be a good time to do my caveats, which I usually do in the beginning. So CIG uses the agile system, which you do a sprint that's typically 2 weeks long. You do an exploration on a particular, let's call it deliverable. So actor status 2, you have a team work on that for 2 weeks. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, they kind of assess where they're at, what they need to do for the next 2 weeks, if they need to bring on another team, if the whole thing needs to be put on ice until other tech comes online, which there's a couple things I'm going to talk about later there in that case. Or if they say, yeah, we're good, let's throw it out to the testers and see if it works. A little more rare, but usually what happens is you kind of get this 14 weeks at the start, and they're kind of guessing this will take 7 sprints. So 7 sprints of 2 weeks each. This will take about 7 sprints to fix or finish, we think. Usually around here, they have a much more realistic idea of how complex or simple this task is. And rarely it'll shrink a little bit, more often it'll grow. I am guessing, just given the number of things in here, this will grow. So the caveat is, just because something is 100% complete doesn't mean that that thing is actually ready to drop in the game by any stretch. It might be they're waiting on another team to jump on and they just aren't available, or they're waiting for some other tech to come in. But that's kind of the caveat. Just because something is 100% complete on here does not mean it's ready to drop into the game. So that caveat a little late in the show, but here we go. So actor stats tier 2, they just started work on it. Aerodynamic control surfaces, we're a few weeks out. We might be getting that one. I wouldn't think for any of the 318s, so not 318.1, not 318.2, but maybe 319 we could be getting this aerodynamic controls, which would kind of be one of our first peeks into the new flight model. Could be very cool. Basically, the aerons on your wings, basically little winglets on the end of your wings, will actually control your ship. So if you fly something like a Gladius with actually that's actually aerodynamic and has wings, it's going to fly much better than something like, say, the Drake Cutter that's basically a dump truck with little tiny wings and big engines. I have a feeling the Cutlass is not going to fare well in atmosphere. Like what? Probably about 2 months out. I'm guessing they'll stretch a little bit beyond that, but that team's actually pretty fast. So just because there weren't a ton of changes this time, I am going to focus a little bit more on the ships just because that's kind of what people typically really want to hear about. I kind of like to focus on other things most times because other people cover the ships psychotically. But the Imposa Tokii is their medium fighter. So roughly when they rolled out the concept, it looked a lot like the Saber. Kind of in that niche. I think it's a little bit bigger, but it's a medium fighter, which is kind of in a weird place right now, but hopefully by SitCon or IAE, they've kind of balanced them out with the flight models and armor and all of that, although they don't have armor on here. Around the end of Q3, one thing to note about this, there are no downstream teams here, so usually audio, GFX, UI teams have to get involved on a ship, and especially since this one is alien, it might take a little bit longer. So I would expect this one, if this sprint to actually build the ship, and it looks like it's pretty far along, I would put about 6 more weeks on the end of that one just for the downstream teams to take their shot at it. In the Imposa Tokii, they added 12 weeks just to kind of give you an idea. So it was going to drop around here, and then they popped it here. So it looked like it might have been, well, they might have finished the body in time for June. But I had said before, expect that to keep going on till IAE because of the downstream teams. Now it looks like they're going to be working on it out to here. I'm guessing because of the animations on it. And then the downstream teams will take on. So artificial gravity right here is something that your engineers will eventually be able to control in the ship. They'll be able to control the atmosphere, artificial gravity, basically the way the power is allocated through the ship, like through nodes. So you can route around somewhere that's had damage. But artificial gravity is one of those. We've just reached the halfway point. I would guess this will be an end of the year thing, if at all. I was thinking 319 might be a sneaky engineering patch. I think that might be 320 now. There's just enough things that have kind of slipped just enough that I think that it might be 3.20. They'll try to sneak that in. So we've got cave archetypes here, which are nearly complete. I always like to talk about this one because this is one of those things that we know for a fact they're working on several other kinds of caves. So they've said something about ice caves and crystal caves and probably underwater caves and stuff like that. So even though they're wrapping here, expect them to wrap whatever the one that they're working on here and then make another one. We know they're going to have rock caves and I think I said snow caves, but yeah, this one, even though they're going to finish here, that's just kind of that sprint and then they're going to keep going. So just kind of skating past Squadron 42 here. You can sort of see that they're doing work on these. Another thing I always say is expect these things to keep jumping out until Squadron 42 goes gold. So until they're like, the game is releasing next week, these bars should be stretching out to that point because this is polish. They're not, I would assume this is in a beta state now. It's feature complete. They're just making sure everything works 100%. So here we are, we're down at character creator and character work. These are both Squadron 42 assets, and you can see they don't have the little Squadron 42 tag by them, or not Squadron 42. They don't have the PU tag by them. Even so, these have wrapped a couple times, but I wouldn't be shocked if we get a new character creator, because that would be something that that would pay off well to drop it on the PU and sort of see how the community uses it and then iterate on it for Squadron 42 in a live environment would make a lot of sense. So don't be shocked if we get a new character creator in the next year. Maybe not 319, but maybe 320. It would be cool if we got it by 319. I've been saying for a while that I would not be floored if we got traversal and engineering for 319. It looks like engineering is going to slip, but traversal is still on there. So climbing ladders, sliding, swimming. I'm forgetting one, but crawling, they were going to change up. Vaulting, that kind of thing. So traversal options, it would make sense to kind of drop a new character creator on us, like make your new character and see all the new things they can do. I don't know. 319 is a possibility for that. If not that, I could see them dropping on us in 3.20. Crusader Spirit, I'm still saying that the Crusader Spirit is going to be an IAE asset. Just the downstream teams aren't in yet. It's not a hugely complicated ship, but even though it's wrapping around the time that they're saying 319 would drop, they could do the thing that they did with the Scorpius in 317, where 317 was stretching out and out and out, and they just kind of threw us a bone. They said, well, we finished the Scorpius, we weren't going to release it until 318, but we've got it done, so here you go, Merry Christmas. I think literally Merry Christmas when they release that thing. But with the Crusader Spirit, it could be the same thing, that 319 starts stretching out and the downstream teams hop in on this thing, which Crusader has a pretty well established style guide, and this isn't a huge ship. We might get this for 319, but I would expect this more to be an IA thing. So into quarter three. Just going to point out that Duster faction outfits have dropped, or at least they've been completed right now. The significance of that is that if you've ever gone into a bunker and it's not totally clear who's security and who are the bad guys, like when they're not the Nine Tails, this will help with that. I think the Dusters are the ones that are around Hurston. Freight elevators just wrapped. Now, will there be more sprints on this one? Probably. This one's highly related to persistence. So basically, if you as opposed to having a magical bag of holding that you can pull out clothes and armor and dump it on yourself when you're in your landing zone, what'll happen is you'll either physically be storing it in your hab or on your ship or at the location, and it will come up on one of these freight elevators instead. Or if you buy cargo, it'll come up on a freight elevator in your hangar, and you'll have to move it onto your ship manually, either by paying NPCs or doing it yourself. Or alternatively, you'll have to unload your ship onto a freight elevator before you can sell that cargo. So freight elevators are a pretty big deal for the next iteration of persistence. So hacking is kind of a cool one. It just wrapped. It's wrapped a couple times, but it seems like the Squadron 42 gang are the ones that actually were working on it latest. So whether they're going to keep going with it or not, who knows? This might be one of those that's waiting for other tech before it's actually implemented. But we could be getting hacking this year, which originally this was just supposed to be a mini game that you could kind of do optionally when you walk around places. Now, just given the number of people that are working on this, it looks like it could be a game loop all on its own. You might have people that actually specialize in safe cracking or ship cracking, basically hacking their way onto a ship. It's looking like it's going to be a pretty big game loop in the game. Lorville Cityscape, this is one that's releasing in 319. This is why I said when they're committed, they might do polish on this, but this thing's wrapped. So yeah, that's why it's committed, because they've basically got what they wanted for 319 done. And now they've got basically 3 months to kind of polish it out. And that's if they release 319 in June. I would assume if they don't release 319 in June, unless they have other associated things with Lorville and 319, they might get us this one early. But I would think that that's kind of one of their big ticket 319 items. So they're going to wait for 319 before they drop that one. So probably, if I had to guess, 319 will drop more closer to September than June, but we'll see. Map and radar system rework. This one also just wrapped. This kind of went along with my theory that 319 would be a UI patch. That's what I was forgetting, was UI, traversal, and engineering. It looks like engineering slipped out, but UI might not. And this would be a big one of those, but this would probably be related. This would be the new star map and all of that, but also radar and sensors and stuff like that. But I think it would be heavily tied to the MFD, possibly. And the MFD isn't wrapping until 319 would theoretically be dropping. So we'll see. I still say they could get this in for 319, barring any big blockers, but it would be awesome to have new UI. Here's the new salvage contracts. Now, this is one of those things that makes me question their timeline. So they're talking about salvage contracts being a 319 asset. So if 319 were dropping in June, this is where this would be. Yet this one goes all the way to the end of Q3. Now, what this could be actually doing is they're going to roll out one type of salvage contract here. That's kind of an easy, simpler one. And then they roll out PvP salvage contracts out here. So kind of the same thing that they're doing with Ghost Hollow, where they had a PvE mission and then they rolled out a PvP mission the next time around. They could be doing the same thing with salvage contracts. So in June, we get the easy one. In September, we get the hard one. New player experience, another 319 asset, wrapped. Origin X1. So this is the Origin space bike. For a long time, I've said that would make a lot of sense to release the 600i gold standard. So the remake on that at the same time as the Origin 600i. We know they're working on the 600i again because they showed off pictures. They had a new guy actually working on the turrets for the 600i. So it doesn't show any work here, but we know work was done. So it for whatever reason, it didn't end up on the Jira. The Origin added 14 weeks to it. And so this is one of those situations where if you're just looking at this, the Origin is this little tiny space bike. It's just got this sprint that's like years long. It's like, what is so special about this bike? And that's when you drop this down, you kind of see the context that one team worked on it back in 2021, or I guess the beginning of 2022, and the second team won't start work on it, which they were supposed to start work, I think, right now, basically, but they're not going to start work until Q3. So I'm thinking what they're going to try to do is drop the 600i on us for Q3 for IAE and drop the X1 on us at the same time. And so that's what this is telling me, is we're not going to release just a bike on its own. We're going to release it with the 600i. We figure we're going to be getting back to the 600i probably once 319 is wrapping. We'll kind of get in there and do that like after the sales are going, because it looked like they had the gray box pretty far along. Origin again has a pretty good style guide. The 400i really kind of upped the game and made it modern, so they can take a lot of the assets from the 400i and bring them over to the 600i. So it would make a lot of sense. The Origin X1 to me is kind of a good flag of when the 600i is going to drop. So I'd say watch those. That's not guaranteed. That's just sort of what's going on in my brain. Persistent hangars. This is another one that the freight elevator, probably isn't going to come, almost certainly won't come until persistent hangars are done. You can see they're not planning on wrapping persistent hangars until like Q3. So that might be a 3.20 asset, is basically that sort of persistent cargo running for tier 2 or 3, whatever you consider tier 1 or 0. You'll get persistent hangars, persistent habs, and those freight elevators in 3.20, or maybe 3.19 if it's actually the September patch. We'll see. So going back to engineering, resource management is going to be the keystone feature of engineering. Basically, resource management is the core of that, where you're controlling your ship from the CPU and dealing with components going out and that sort of thing, and components going out actually impacting what happens on your ship. You can kind of see again, this is one of those around the end, around IAE. So 3.20, this is another one that kind of tells me that engineering slipped, that they kind of maybe were eyeballing it for 3.19, but it's more likely going to be 3.20 or end of the year. RSI links. So this one's tentative. You can see they're basically wrapping on it right now. Audio is a downstream team. They're still going to need GFX, lighting, UI teams in there. But again, the RSI links is about the size of the Ursa, so it's not like the 600i that's pretty big. So, I mean, I would not expect that one to slip more than a couple weeks in production. So it will easily, even if they were to release 3.19 in June, well in time for that. And on the topic of RSI, the RSI Polaris has actually begun work. So 24-week sprint. This is an enormous ship. This one's going to go at least a year. So June of 2024, start looking for it to drop around there. They do have a pretty good style guide for the Polaris, or I mean for RSI. So I mean, they might be able to go through it faster, but I would still be shocked if they could drop it within a year. But we'll see. If they can, that's a really good sign for things to come for their ability to make bigger ships, which we've kind of been waiting for them to turn that corner. Salvage, vehicle munching. This is the next tier of salvaging, where when you scrape the skin off, you're basically left with that sort of chunky skeleton bit that sort of has the cross hatching on it. You can eat that when this rolls out. So there's a grinder on the front of the Vulture that's pretty small. So as opposed to just eating the skin, the actually internals, the skeleton of the ship might be more valuable than the skin is. And so you might just want to peel the skin off of things, throw those carts out the back, or throw those storage units out the back, and then munch the ship because that's where the real money is at. Who knows? That might be the way it goes. Or if you're trying to get one thing over the other. But that's coming in 3.19. Again, wrapped right now. They're probably going to have a little bit more work on it, but we'll easily make it in for 3.19 as of right now. That's what it looks like. Sliding. So again, this is kind of one of those traversal things I was talking about. Sliding looks like it's going to be sort of close on that window for 3.19. I would guess they're going to do all of the traversal at once, along with the character creator. Would be really cool if they implemented both of those at once. I can't say anything about the character creator because that is a Squadron 42 asset. But if we could get all of the traversal stuff in one big patch, that'd be cool. So that might be 3.20. Most of it is done except for sliding and swimming, or at least their sprints are done for now. Again, you can never tell if they're just waiting for some other tech, like the character actor feature team, which is the one that does this, might be working on something else in the meantime, and then all those things will stretch back out. But right now it looks like they're all kind of done. So we might be getting a lot better traversal, maybe in 3.19, but probably more likely 3.20, just because of ones like this. Or we might get some and not others. It would just be pretty cool if we got traversal for 3.19, because 3.19 is looking kind of like a little bit lighter patch. So here's swimming, same situation as sliding. just kind of out there, sort of right on the edge of that window. Okay, so now we're down in the unannounced ships, which is kind of what I wanted to talk about this time. 78 weeks. The vast majority of that was a concept art sprint. And I'll come back to this one because I've got a theory now. 37 weeks. This is a straight to flyable. This will be a small vehicle. 37 weeks would be like a starter ship size, or maybe even think a vehicle on the Atlas platform, because so something like the Centurion or the Spartan or the Ballista are all Atlas platform things, so ground vehicle. The downstream teams have already been in this thing, so this thing is ready to drop. I'm guessing probably not 319, but this would, we know there's a MISC Fury out there, and so since this is the only vehicle right now that's in concept that had the VFX team work on it, and the guy that sort of dropped that in was a VFX guy, pretty safe bet this is the MISC Fury. So is MISC releasing a medium fighter, which is what most people are thinking? I don't think so. My bet was a bike, because the Honda Fury is an actual chopper in real life, and that's much more something that MISC would release. All of their fighters are variants, like all of their combat ships are variants of industrial ships. A light or heavy fighter just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense on its own. Like if they're releasing 3 ships and one of them happens to be the fighter variant, that would make more sense to me. MISC doesn't really have a true starter. They've got the Reliant series, which is kind of competing with the Titan and the Nomad and like the Drake Cutter. It's like a starter plus, but they don't have a true starter, so they don't have something that's down there at like the Aurora, the Mustang, like that size ship, 100i. And that sort of seems to be something that's missing in their platform. So maybe the MISC Fury is a starter. Could be. Sort of a weird name for a small ship. But 37 weeks is either a small ship or a variant of a known ship. Think a variant that would be like Freelancer to, I don't know, what do they have? They don't have anything that's Freelancer to Starfarer size. They don't have something in between there. Maybe. But anyway, 37 weeks. It's a medium to small ship typically, or ground vehicle, like a more complicated ground vehicle. 15 weeks for just the concept art. Medium large ship, not huge. 29 weeks, but this is the actual content team is working on this. There is no downstream teams, but 29 weeks isn't a really long time, so it's either a mid-size variant or a smaller ship. Again, it looks like it's something that they're aiming for IAE. 28 weeks for just the concept art. This is a big ship, and looks like they might be dropping the concept on us for 319, I would guess, for this one. But this one will be a pretty big ship. It would be wrapping, so May is Invictus, which is kind of the military parade display or celebration in the verse. And then June is Alien Week, and I'll come back to this in a second. In May, you have military ships. In June, you have alien ships. And they usually release a military concept in May and a alien concept in June. This one's more of May territory, so more Invictus. So I would expect this one to be a bigger military ship. So 28 weeks, maybe something Perseus sized would make sense. But the one that I really wanted to talk about, and this is what we'll wrap on, is this one here. So this one was 78 weeks. And just looking back, 78 weeks is an enormous amount of time. So the actual sprint for the concept art itself was 66 weeks, I believe, and they still haven't finished it. To give you an idea, the Misk Odyssey was 55 weeks. So something bulkier than the Carrack took 55 weeks. This thing is taking 66, and that's just the concept art. They've already started working on it, so this seems to be something relatively new that they're trying, and I've got a theory on why. So let's go back to when this starts. So another important thing to watch is the time that the concept art is ending is getting pretty close to the June mark as opposed to May. So Invictus would be about here. So this probably isn't a military ship, which means that it might be an alien ship. So if it drops around 319, we could be getting an alien ship. And I think I've got a clue as to what this is. So we go back to when this thing started in Q1 of 2022 and week 7. So let's pop over to here where I have pregame things. So you can see here in Q1 of 2022, GN cargo finished for Squadron 42, and GN facial rigging ended like right before that in Q4 of 2021, which was a Squadron 42 and a Star Citizen asset. Now, GN cargo was just Squadron 42, but it is interesting that that wrapped right about here, and then work on this new concept ship started here, almost like they were saying, we need a bigger ship than the Gaitak Rallin to carry this. So let's go ahead and look at something. This is the Gaitak Rallin, which is roughly Starfarer sized. I think it's a hair smaller than the Starfarer, but in that range. It's a heavy cargo carrier. They've done the concept on this, but they haven't really started working on it. And this would definitely be a ship that if they had started working on it, they wouldn't be hiding it behind this. They'd be like, yeah, we've started work on the Gaitak Rallin. And they wouldn't be doing a concept pass on it. And it sure as hell wouldn't be taking 66 weeks because they've already done the concept pass. So it wouldn't be the Gaitak Rallin, which starts bringing in other options if it's actually a GN ship, which I think it might be. I think it might be a really big alien ship. So these were concepts of alien cargo movers, which this was the very early days of Star Citizen, like before they knew what the game was going to be. You could sort of see there's an early GN, there's GN back here. This is a GN world. This was kind of the cargo ship that they were going with. I think they kind of migrated this size ship to the Gaitak Rallin to give you an idea for the size of this thing. So that kind of gives you a sense of scale for this monstrosity, because these right here are those little ships. So by little, you kind of get a sense that if these things are Gaitak Rallin size, and we don't really have any confirmation over what scale these are, but I mean, you could kind of see these lines right here. Actually, this would be smaller. These would be kind of the equivalent of a Freelancer, maybe. But you can kind of get a sense. If this were a Freelancer, how big is this damn thing? But that is, I believe, a Xi'an battleship. So it probably wouldn't be that. What I think is probably more likely is that it's one of these. So this was a concept that rolled out in the early days, and it was basically the GN version of the Whole Sea. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know if this one is a fan-made concept or if this was one of the concepts that a dev at CIG made. So if you know, let me know in the comments down below if this was actually official or not. I think it was, because I seem to remember seeing it on the CIG website, but I don't remember if that was in the early days where they were just kind of like, fans, help us out and make some art for us kind of a thing. It is kind of funny that you can see Orion back here in the Seven Sisters of Pleiades. So It's a generic star map as opposed to the custom star map that they have. So again, could be fan made, but again, to kind of give you a scale, this is a whole E. This is this thing. Now, something like this, or even if it's not this, which granted at this point, this is almost 9 years old. So they would definitely bring it up to the modern aesthetics. This to me feels like it would have a 66-week concept sprint, something this scale. That's the Xi'an equivalent of a whole, maybe not a whole E, which this is, but like a whole E or a whole D or a whole C, something like that. I could see. And that would explain the long concept sprint because they'd have to actually get the style guide and the feel of Xi'an ships down, which they kind of explored that a little bit with the Gatok Corellan, but they'd have to really push it with this ship because as opposed to kind of being available to the human market, this thing would be, we're just going to start seeing them in the verse kind of a deal. Like they've just started coming in through the Stanton system and maybe becoming available to us. That's my theory, guys. I just thought that was kind of a fun thing to kind of chew on. I've kind of been going back and forth about what that ship would be because, yeah, again, 66 weeks, really long sprint. And that's like damn near Pegasus carrier territory, which I don't think they'll give it to us. We can find one in the verse. Maybe we could take it, but yeah, it's, I'm thinking just based on this and based on when it's roughly dropping concept wise, I think it's a big alien ship. Now, whether it's this or Banu, I don't think that they'd drop another big Banu ship on us after putting a pin in the Banu Merchantman. People that own the Banu Merchantman might get upset by that. Just saying. All right, gang. Well, that's all I got for now. Let me know down in the comments below what you think this thing is, or if you think I'm onto something, or if you think I'm way off. What you think of the Miss Fury. Any questions you got? I've been debating doing this one live and just kind of having it open for question and answers. If you think that would be fun, let me know. Might turn it into a thing, or I'll just keep recording it as these 30 to 45-minute bits. But anyway, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and catch me next time.